Welcome on Texas football. Good Sunday morning to everyone. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Longhorns winning 52-37 over the Arkansas Razorbacks. Gerry Hamilton and I are going to talk a little bit about it. Thanks to our friend Adam Lowy over at Lowy Law Firm for sponsoring this episode. Let's start with the offense, Gerry, if you don't mind. The Longhorns and Arch Manning were hot early and often on Saturday. Really impressive showing from Manning. Finishes the day 18 of 30 for 389 yards, 4 touchdowns passing, 1 touchdown rushing, and even a touchdown receiving. What'd you think of Arch's showing?
Yeah, I thought, look, first we always have to acknowledge Arkansas is a really bad secondary, right? So you got to get that out of the way in defense. But Arch Manning still he made a lot of plays. There were 2 or 3 drops amongst that 12 incompletions that probably would have taken him to 450-ish yards in that game. I thought he was very efficient with the football. I thought he made great decisions. I think he continues to show really good pocket awareness, ability to step up in the pocket, know how to play in the pocket. That comes as no surprise to anybody. I mean, the way the guy's been taught the game his whole life. I thought there was explosive plays to 5 different receivers. So Parker Livingston, Emmett Mosley, Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, Jack Indries, all had explosive plays in the past games. And those are the only explosive plays. Texas didn't have an explosive play in the run game. They had one 12-yard run by Trey Wisner late in the game. So Arch Manning, his passing accounted for all the explosives in the game for Texas. And there were plenty of them. I thought he got pretty good protection from his offensive line. I mean, Quincy Rhodes didn't feel like a factor in the game. Xavier Story, not a factor in the game. They didn't have a sack. They had some pressures, but no sacks. So the offensive line did their job, giving Arch Manning enough time to scan the field, play in the pocket when he did have pressure. There weren't any big busts on the offensive line, in my knowledge. And gave Arch Manning enough time and the routes enough time to develop, because longer routes were going to be wins in this game against the Arkansas safeties. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, you mentioned that Texas had 8 explosive passing plays of 20 yards or more, Gerry, against the Razorbacks yesterday. I would say this as well. What's currently happening right now is we're seeing the maturation of Arch Manning before our eyes. In the last 4 games, I'm going to give you these stats. Since Mississippi State and on, Arch Manning is 99 of 152 for 1,314 yards, 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 2 rushing touchdowns. So 13 total touchdowns, just 2 interceptions, no turnovers on fumbling the ball. That is averaging, by the way, right at 13 to 13 and a half yards per reception or per pass completion. So it's not just dinking and dunking. He is throwing the ball downfield and completing. And I think that we're seeing or witnessing a young man that's starting to play well. In this game, by the way, impressive stat for the Longhorns. Yes, Arkansas theoretically outgained Texas by about 20 yards. I think 490 to 510 or something like that. But the bigger piece is it took Arkansas right at 80 plays to get that 510. Texas, it only took 59 plays to get the 410. Texas averaged 8.3 yards per play. 8.3 yards per play. No doubt that was an issue in this game and a big win for the Longhorns. And one of the reasons why Texas kind of, even though they gave up some points late, and we'll talk about the defense in a second, they kind of hid from the Razorbacks a little bit. This game was clearly over before the final tick on the clock. Gerry, thanks again to our sponsor. I mentioned him at the outset, and that is our friends over at Lowy Law Firm. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, and think you might be due compensation, make sure you reach out to Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. They will give you a no strings attached consultation to see if you might be due compensation. Thanks, Adam, for your sponsorship on Texas football and Texas athletics in general. All right, Gerry, next piece. defense, real quick. I thought the Longhorns on Saturday started off like missing and busting assignments, uncharacteristically from Michael Taft, for example. A couple of plays, missed a tackle, got beat up pretty bad on one from Mike Washington, the big running back. But that's what Arkansas has done historically. And then starting maybe in midway through the second quarter, it felt like the Texas defense kind of tightened, and then they played a really good end of second quarter all the way through the third quarter before Arkansas started getting on the board again in that fourth quarter. What did you think of the Longhorn defense yesterday?
Yeah, so, it's interesting because Arkansas had a lot of success running the ball on first down, right? Bobby Petrino's, if not a top 2 play caller in college football, he's top 4 or 5. I mean, I people have a hard time naming 5 that have been better over their career than Bobby Petrino. So you got to give him some credit, a lot of credit. But they had 188 rushing, 324 passing. Some of those were late after the game was 52 or out of hand, let's say. KJ Jackson came in, wasn't accurate, but still threw for 206 yards in that game. So, look, I think the same issues that have crept up on defense didn't change this game. I think whether it was in man, whether it was in zone, Texas has some secondary issues going into the final game of the season. I thought it was good to see some of the youth movement and let these guys start to grow up because there's at least 2 games left this year, one that has a lot of meaning on Friday, and then whether you get lucky and get in the college football playoff or you're in a bowl game, which will be a quality bowl game now, with 8 wins. These had 2 big games coming up left for the season for these young kids. So I like to see that Cade Phillips got to start and he played a lot. It's going to be interesting, Bobby, next week to see what happens with Ty Anthony Smith out the first half. Anthony Hill, Steve Sarkisian mentioned, is going to play next week. Obviously, that gives you your second best defensive player back next week. But Ty Anthony Smith ate up a lot of snaps. He was your best space linebacker in coverage. So what does Texas do there against tight ends that are better, arguably better pro prospects than anybody they've played, including Georgia? I mean, that's an arguable point. So the tight ends have been a real problem for Texas in SEC play as the conference schedule has moved on. And now they're playing an A&M team that has at least 2 pros at that position. And they're going to everything's on tape to really test the Texas linebackers with tight ends and coverage. So how is Texas going to react to that and respond to that with Ty Anthony Smith out the first half?
Yeah, the Aggies also have a pair of wide receivers, or really 3 wide receivers that can test people downfield deep or on crossing routes that Texas has also had problems with. But let's stick to the game yesterday, Jerry, real quick. Colin Simmons, obviously, with the strip sack. That was a big play in this game. Jelani McDonald with the, I don't know where that came from, interception of Taylon Green on defense. A couple of big plays there. But on offense, it was really Arch connecting in the deep game with not only DeAndre Moore, who had 3 TDs, but also Parker Livingston had a big touchdown and another big catch downfield. Ryan Wingo made a couple of big plays. Even Jack Indries got in on it, and Mosley as well. It was one of the better games, not only of Arch's career, but the receivers, in my opinion. Yeah. They got open early and often. You mentioned the offensive line doing a relatively good job. I agree with that. A couple other things. You mentioned a youth movement of sorts. We saw not only Grayson Littleton start on Saturday, we also saw Cade Phillips at corner start. Lance Jackson played a lot along the defensive front as a true freshman. Justice Terry got some time. And then Jonah Williams got some real time at safety as well. At one point in this game, Texas had 3 freshman defensive backs on the field at the same time. We were talking to Rod Babers in the postgame, myself and Brian Robeson, and Rod made the point, look, it's that time of year. You're going into game 11 or you're in game 11. Yeah. And if your freshmen are as good as your seniors or your juniors, it's time to start playing the freshmen. Yeah. Because they need that kind of depth. Do you think that's a smart idea overall? Is this something that we need to even see sooner? What are your thoughts there?
No, I definitely think it's smart. I mean, for multiple reasons. One, they're very talented, right? And we continue to talk about how talented the freshman class is. And then that doesn't mean you're going to see a ton of those guys this season. We're seeing a little bit more as the season's moved along. So I think that's important to get some of those guys some snaps as they've actually won positions, not handing them snaps, but guys in front of them have not kept their positions and earned those positions to be kept. So I think you're starting to see more of those guys get reps. And, like in the case of Jonah Williams, he's in baseball in the spring, so doesn't go through spring practice. He injures his hamstring at the end of baseball. And that lingers early in the season. So he's way behind. I would say right now he's at about where he would have been at game 5 if he had been healthy coming out of base. That's how far behind he is, 6 weeks of game action. So he's just now getting to the point where he's practiced enough since he didn't have spring practice. They've seen him rep enough in practice to where they know he can help them. But I'll say this, Bobby, it's also key to get a look at those guys in games because Texas has big NIL decisions to make on players that are on this roster coming up quickly. And they've got to truly see through game action who they think is going to be a really good player and who maybe not for them. Those are the tough decisions that have to be made even when the games are meaningful. So I absolutely love that Cade Phillips got a start, that we're seeing more of Jonah Williams, right? I just think it's more of Justice Terry. He had a really good game in limited snaps against Georgia. We continue to see Lance Jackson, some of those young defenders, because a lot of defenders out of that 2025 number 1 ranked class are going to be future starters on this team, whether it's next year or the year after if they're patient. A lot of those guys Texas really likes, and they're going to be starters.
Yeah, I was going to say Littleton and Phillips led the team in pass breakups yesterday, 3 and 2 respectively. Jerry, thinking about some things that bothered me from the game yesterday, the last 3 games and the last 3 games in the fourth quarter, Vanderbilt scored 21 consecutive against Texas. Georgia scored 21 consecutive against Texas. And then yesterday, Arkansas, to end the game, scored 14 consecutive against Texas. That does not portend well. Is it just the linebackers and safeties not getting on the same page? Or is this a Texas defense that is wearing down late, or opponents are figuring them out to an extent that they're really being able to stack on points later in the game?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit all of it, Bobby. I really do. But I think a lot of it is the secondary issues, though. Whether it is just busted coverages, which didn't happen at all last year. We've seen too many busted coverages, whether it's playing off too much, right? Not be aggressive enough at times, down and distance situational, whether it's, having to move some guys out of the starting lineup and move some youthful guys in, some of the youth in. I think it's a multitude. Like when we talked about the offense the first half of the season, it wasn't one issue. Everybody pointed to the offensive line, but Arch wasn't playing well. The receivers weren't playing consistent, right? There was a lot of things going on. I think within the secondary, there's a lot of things going on. You had injury as well earlier with Michael Taff out, then Jelani McDonald got concussed. So you've had about everything within that secondary that could cause what we're seeing, but coverage busts are the big thing for me, and that has caused them to go to a little bit of a youth movement.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that was interesting as well. Nick Townsend got his – I'm talking about youth movement. Nick Townsend, a young man out of the Spring area, a tight end, got his first catch of the season as well. So he's being utilized more and more. I want to go back, though, to something we kind of started with, and what I think we should all circle, and that's Arch Manning's performance, not just on Saturday, but through the last 4 games. Really impressive maturation. And you mentioned what they want to see back next year and making decisions and referencing the transfer portal, all that stuff. I've got to tell you, Jerry, right now, I don't know of a quarterback or at least a thrower of the football outside of maybe Fernando Mendoza at at Indiana that's throwing the football as well as Arch Manning downfield this time of season. I mean, he's really starting to come into his own, and it's readily apparent. It really is. 11 TDs, two interceptions in the last 4 games, 99 of 152 for 1,314 yards. He's averaging over 300 yards a game over the last 4 games. That's big time stuff from the young man.
I want to commend him for mental toughness and physical toughness. Think about how far we've come from the UTEP game. That was a scary moment.
Or Florida or Ohio State or any of those early ones.
The UTEP was really scary, though, from what's he going through standpoint, because there were balls in the dirt. There were swing passes in the stands damn near. I mean, there were some worrisome moments where he arguably had the yips. And that's a hard thing to come back from. So mentally, he's shown that he's tough. And that is going to go a heck of a long way in his career. And then physically, he is – Jesse Palmer mentioned it on the telecast yesterday that Arch Manning has proved that he is a physically tough kid because he has taken a lot of hits in the first half of the year, went through the mental struggles throwing the football and then getting hit at the same time, and has come all the way back from that. When there was doubt creeping in, you knew it. You could see it when he was in the pocket, when he was releasing a football. There was doubt in his mind that he's come back from all that to produce like he has the second half of the SEC schedule. I mean, a hat tip to Arch for being a tough dude. And I don't think it's surprising. Anybody that's kind of watched the Manning family or play football over the years, they are mentally tough. But it's glad to see Arch show that through his struggles. Because, Bobby, there were times early in the season where we kind of wondered what was going to happen the rest of the year with him. He's checked 2 big boxes this year as a quarterback.
Another thing that we have not talked about, but Texas flagged for 7 penalties on Saturday. That's a little bit lower than their average. Still got a little sloppy at times. But, Jerry, the last thing I want to end on is recruiting. You were out there. There were a lot of recruits on campus, including some official visits from guys committed elsewhere. Jet Walker, running back out of Georgetown. Caden Shear, offensive lineman out of Georgetown. Josiah Villamale, defensive back out of Fort Bend, down in the Houston area, as well as Rocky Cummings, a linebacker committed to Cal out of Chatsworth and Carlsbad, that area of Southern California. Jamarian Carlton, a defensive lineman committed to Baylor, was back on campus as well, as a slew of guys that are already committed to Texas, whether it's Derek Cooper, the running back out of Miami, or James Johnson, defensive lineman out of Miami as well. Big recruiting weekend, and I think that the big win will help recruiting because Texas, it's one thing to be 8-3, another thing to be 7-4, and you lose to a winless Arkansas team in conference. You think that'll help recruiting? And what do you think we should see over the next couple of days to a week with signing day in the offing, not until December 3rd?
Yeah, I mean, signing day is less than 2 weeks away at this point, essentially. I mean, that's about where we're at here. Look, I think the question most people are going to ask is about Bryson Martinez and Richard Anderson, the LSU commits. Well, let's start with the reality of that. If Lane Kiffin announces after the Egg Bowl he's going to LSU, those guys are off the table, more than likely. They're going to have a lot of excitement around that program. They're going to have a lot of hype. That becomes really difficult. If we're just being real, I'm not saying it's impossible, but that task becomes much more difficult. Anybody knows that. And then after that, Jamarian Carlton back on campus, the Baylor commit, the edge out of Temple. So he's been on campus twice this month. That's in recruiting. That's generally a pretty good sign of a kid that's committed elsewhere. I mean, that's, no matter what we're hearing behind the scenes, that's generally a pretty good sign for the team trying to flip a kid. And then Baylor got waxed again yesterday. But then you also have the Georgetown guys, Caden Scherer, who's committed to Stanford. I think he has a little bit more of a decision to make versus Jet Walker has a lot of UT graduates in his family. He's currently committed to Minnesota. That seems like a much easier decision than a kid who picked Stanford for all the right reasons. I think close to home and playing at Texas can win out. I do, but I think those two guys are not the same necessarily. But I think Texas is gonna crush the official visits with both those guys. Josiah Vilmel already have it as a Texas lean. That just comes down to his meeting with Sark and the staff the first time they've been around each other in that situation as a guy that Texas has offered. That's a different than he kept showing up for a home game a year ago or when in early September. That game's changed now. Rocky Cummings is an interesting one. Bobby, he looked really good physically.
You saw him on Saturday?
Yeah, yesterday when he arrived for his official visit, he looked really good physically. I mean, that guy he has good length to him. He is 6'4", 210. I think that's a legitimate height weight for him. I mean, he looks like a guy that's going to be 6'4", 240, 250, maybe 235 if a college wants to keep his weight there. Justin Wilcox is a really good evaluator of defensive players. That's almost like a Gary Patterson thing. Okay, if Gary Patterson took a kid, you always went back and watched the tape again, right? Rocky Cummings is that in California on the West Coast with Justin Wilcox. He finds some really good players that maybe weren't nationally recruited. And I think Texas getting Rocky Cummings on campus is very smart. I think he is a very talented guy. And I think he may be more talented and physically frame upside-wise than Karan Maycock, who they brought in earlier this year. I'm not comparing them as players as seniors, but Rocky Cummings has a big frame, long arms, big hands, just a big frame kid. Looked really impressive. And then obviously getting Richard Wesley back on campus, getting Derek Cooper and James Johnson back on campus. I think that's really big for Texas. Hayward Howard. So I think they had a really good showing at the game yesterday. And they have a real opportunity now, Bobby, to maybe flip the script a little bit in 27 if they can watch. I'm going to say upset because A&M's 11-0. Upset, beat A&M, however you want to say it. If Texas can go out and win that game, I think they have a chance to flip a script in recruiting because A&M has a lot of mojo right now, and they're going very aggressive. Texas Tech's going very aggressive on the 27 recruiting trail. Texas is more of the long game player in recruiting. But if Texas can beat A&M Friday, I think they have a chance to kind of start flipping that script in 27.
Sounds good. All right, that's going to do it for Rapid Reactions. I want to say thank you again to our sponsor, Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, and think you might be due compensation, reach out to Adam and his firm for a free, no strings attached consultation. Again, that's LowyLawFirm.com. All right, Jerry, we'll be on the lookout for recruiting news today. There could be a lot of news coming down the pike right now as we get ready for that. Not only these visits, official visits ending up, but guys that you said were on unofficial visits and committed elsewhere, like Jamarian Carlton. We'll be watching it closely. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. This has been Rapid Reactions. Hook 'em horns.